So if we think about the possibility of a sex trafficking investigation, sex trafficking related charges, if we go to December 2023, there was a woman who accused Combs and former Bad Boy Entertainment president Harvey Pierre and another person of sex trafficking and gang raping her when she was 17 years old. There was a Jane Doe who says that she was flown from Michigan to New York City, supplied with drugs and alcohol, and then assaulted by all three men at Combs's recording studios. Now, Combs, by the way, has always denied the allegations. And in fact, in response to one lawsuit, had posted, I believe it was on Instagram, enough is enough. For the last couple of weeks, I've sat silently and watched people try to assassinate my character, destroy my reputation and my legacy. Sickening allegations have been made against me by individuals looking for a quick payday. Let me be absolutely clear. I did not do, and he goes on to say, did not do this. Now, again, that was in relation to a lot of these lawsuits being filed. But when we're talking about sex trafficking, Tracy, and we're talking about the Southern District of New York possibly initiating this search warrant, where does your mind go in terms of what we might be looking at in terms of potential charges, potential allegations, and how it's connected to New York?
So I absolutely believe, and again, simply my hypothesis, he is innocent until proven guilty, that he will be arrested and well indicted on sex trafficking charges. I have no doubt about that, and I do believe that he was most likely the kingpin of this. These girls, what that tells me, if it's out of the Southern District of New York, is this is spanning multiple states, and that he is trafficking or allegedly trafficking girls across multiple states, across the United States. This isn't just an isolated incident in one location. And so I have heard things as well about his Hamptons parties and things happening in those Hamptons parties as well. So I suspect more evidence may come out as a result of that. But these are extremely serious charges. And part of me, too, is frustrated by somewhat the complacency, right, of the entertainment industry as a whole in this. And I think sometimes people fly under the radar for a long time, like Epstein did as well, because people are scared. People want to still climb the ranks. And we're doing it all the while sort of sacrificing the safety of these young victims or girls that are involved in this. And that is deeply troubling.
Before we get into more of this, I hear you, and I think, it's really, really frightening to think about. I mean, I read all these allegations and the lawsuits, and I've never heard anything like it. And obviously, we don't know exactly where this investigation's going. But if Combs is charged with federal crimes here, but he's not in the country, and he's actually in a country or a jurisdiction where there's no extradition agreement, how do you get him back? What do federal authorities do?
That's a really good question. And I looked up just because I was curious actually about
Yeah.
Antigua. I don't know all of them off the top of my head. Some I do, some I don't. But we do have an extradition treaty with them. Right now, though, because of the public nature of this, I have a very hard time believing that a country would allow his plane to land with him on it in their country. They don't have to let him land if they don't want to. And so I think that it would be very difficult for him to be able to land in an inhospitable country simply because they don't want him. We do have extradition treaties with more countries than I think people would think. And typically they will send folks back to us as long as we take the death penalty off of the table. And I don't believe that this is a death penalty case. It's Southern District of New York. And so I believe that whether we have an extradition treaty or not with whatever country he may or may not go to, they will send him back.
And talk to me about what you think they have in terms of a case, because, right, you say they want to preserve the evidence for a potential prosecution against either him or someone else. There's a criminal case building, but they had to have probable cause for the search warrant to be issued. And I wonder, I mentioned some of the interviews. They wouldn't have had enough to try to arrest him first and then do the raid, or they need the raid first to see what's at the property before they can build a case and build charges and then arrest him. Talk to me about the timeline of how this typically works in terms of if we're seeing a raid on several properties. Does that in conjunction with an arrest? Does that come before an arrest? How does it typically work?
typically, Jesse, it's in conjunction with an arrest. But I started thinking about this a little bit more last night, and I was thinking that if he has videos and or his associates have videos and they are attempting to distribute those of young male children or female children, that means that a child is in imminent danger. And so
Mm,
part of me wonders if this was done to stop that, and that they will get to the arrest obviously at some point, because as you mentioned, typically these warrants are served and there's usually an indictment that goes hand in hand with that at the same time. So in my opinion, it's not unheard of, it's just a little bit unusual. We don't
right.
typically see this. Anytime we did raids at the FBI of this nature, we also had an arrest warrant for the individual as well. And so it is unusual, but I don't want to say it's unheard of. And again, I'm just speculating, but part of me wonders if this was still actively being distributed. And if it is, they need to shut that down immediately.
Were you surprised at the response that we saw from Douglas Wigdorf? This is a lawyer for Cassie Ventura and one of the Jane Does in response to reports of this search warrant that was issued on Sean Combs. Now, remember, Cassie Ventura settled with Sean Combs, but the statement says, quote, "We will always support law enforcement when it seeks to prosecute those that have violated the law. Hopefully, this is the beginning of a process that will hold Mr. Combs responsible for his depraved conduct." Now, again, in light of that settlement doesn't necessarily mean you're saying Combs is completely innocent. It's you've agreed to resolve the issue. Doesn't absolve him of wrongdoing, but to make that statement, I think that's something to be said. Now, again, of course, he's representing someone else that's continually suing Sean Combs. But again, that statement I thought was really interesting. What was your take on it?
Yeah, I thought that that statement was interesting. My question about it, though, is did he tip them off? Did he provide them with information? Did Cassie Ventura or any of these individuals involved in these civil suits also provide evidence along with that to build this criminal case? Because obviously those two things are separate. So, in my opinion, in listening to that statement, it actually sounds like maybe they did. And that's incredible that they did that, because I believe that Cassie Ventura was absolutely a victim of pretty horrific things. And if she was able to document all of that and provide evidence, then that absolutely would go to building his criminal case.
It's so crazy to think about this. I mean, again, and I'm not surprised by that connection to New York because I go back to Little Rod Jones, and he said he was assaulted at different places, including in New York. So again, what can we expect next to happen as this story develops? And I imagine it's going to develop quite rapidly.
I agree with you. I think it's going to develop quite rapidly as well. I think the next thing that will happen is an indictment of P. Diddy. That's what I think, and that he will be taken into custody hopefully soon, at some point. But honestly, I don't. I'm not sure. This is, like I said, a little
Yeah.
bit unusual, and that there isn't an indictment yet. Although I think one may be forthcoming.
What about other individuals? Because remember, going back to one of the lawsuits, there was an allegation there were violations of the TVPA, the Trafficking and Victims Protection Act, big law aimed at fighting against domestic and international human slavery, and they were filing a civil action with respect to it. But you're basically saying these minors are engaging in commercial sex acts. I would imagine that if this is a really big operation, we could potentially see arrests of other individuals connected to the rapper, right?
I agree. I think we will probably see the arrest of one or both of his sons, because I believe that they, based on evidence in cases that we've seen in the past from a civil perspective, they have been allegedly involved in this. But at the same time, too, I think that there may be a lot of people who have associated with him in his circle that are probably scared right now, because they may have had some involvement in this as well. And so, in my opinion, I think they will start at the top, obviously arresting Diddy, or his sons. And from there, in my opinion, they may try to plea. I don't think he's going to completely avoid jail time or anything like that
Right.
if he's indicted, but maybe they will try to plead to get names of other individuals that are associated with this. But again, completely my hypothesis, Jesse.
And I'll leave on this. There was reporting, there was an allegation that Combs may have been allegedly harassing Mr. Jones because of that lawsuit that he filed. Jones alleges that Combs sent agents to intimidate his 8-year-old daughter and the mother of his child and his ex-wives. So you talk about the imminence of this raid. You talk about the manpower put forward by this raid. If that is true, and again, we don't know if it's connected to the lawsuit in any way, but that's something else to think about, right?
100%. He has a pretty long documented history of threatening individuals and asking them to, I guess, clean up his mess or clean up his dirty work, if you will. And so that is not at all surprising to me. And I do assume that individuals who may have been involved in speaking out or testifying in any of these civil cases may also be awarded some type of security and protection as well.
Tracy Walder, you're the best. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Jesse.